Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of Energy, Society, and the Middle East. We are in week 4, and I want to begin by thanking many of you for sharing your enthusiasm about the course. Make sure, please, that translates into course evaluations, online reviews, word of mouth. Make sure to sort of spread the wealth. I'm glad you're enjoying the course. Please let me know if you have any feedback to make the course better, of course. We're talking about really important stuff here. We're looking at the interaction between the energy sector and culture in the middle part of where all these markets take place, the Middle East. So it's very, very important for so many reasons, and we've looked at many of those reasons so far. Week 1, we've looked at the oil curse, right? How is it that this one resource can take entire economies from rags to riches? And what are some of the major problems that can cause, especially if a particular government or culture is not inclined towards democracy or some sort of representative rule, taxation, etc. Week 2, we've looked at some of the issues that pertain to religion and culture in the Middle East, and how oil especially has funded and fueled certain kinds of conflict, but also shaped, shall we say, especially the modern Islamic tradition. It's also shaped the price of the dollar, right? So the same country, in the case of Saudi Arabia, is controlling both. So we look at really the close relationship between religion and oil, and therefore sort of government and society in a broader sense. Week 3, we've looked at really the role of women as these saviors, really, of developing economies, and how oil is part of that, right? So we got to read quite a bit about that. Anyway, so we're in week 4. We're also looking at how we can save and enhance and improve both the industry and the cultures that lay beneath. And I want to talk in this video about Jürgen's The Quest. Sorry, I never get this right. Here we go. Okay. So I want to commend and thank you all for your discussion forum contributions. Very insightful. By and large, very accurate, and you guys are reading and understanding it, and I'm learning a thing or two also from your feedback. Jürgen is a good writer. He's also an oil man, so the two things can somehow go together. Keep that in mind, that Jürgen is very much a yes man. And he's an oil man, and towards the end of the book, of course, he looks at LNG, liquefied natural gas, as sort of the frontier. So real quickly, a couple of things. If we go day by day, what I'd like to do is try and offer my perspective, like you guys did through the discussion forum, on sort of Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays reading. So with regards to the first day, what is energy security? We're learning what it is, right? It's securing, obviously, the energy market. Remember, this is a market, and oil is not traded at the New York Stock Exchange or in the Houston or Chicago sort of Board of Trade. It's traded as a cartel. Countries get together in dark, smoky rooms and say, this is the price of oil, or we're going to increase or decrease production. It's a very private sort of old boys club. So that's also, it creates sort of layers of the opaqueness, the opposite of transparency. So securing this kind of market is particularly problematic, right? And we look at why, we look also at some of the major threats towards these energy markets, and he talks about cyber hacking, right? And we look at sort of the electronic, internet-based, hacking-based threats that the energy industry is, of course, open to. So he's right, of course, to bring that up, and there's no need to sort of get into more detail as far as that's concerned. The second day, we looked, of course, a little bit at Iran and its nuclear program. And here's some questions for you to consider. So when did Iran's nuclear program begin? The answer is in the 70s, but before the Islamic Republic took over. So again, the sort of Islamic boogeyman is not present in this origin story. Now, who helped start the Iranian nuclear program? The same people who were going to help start the Iraqi sort of energy as well as nuclear program, right? Talking about, Great Britain, France, Russia, the US, So it's Western countries that were working with Middle Eastern countries, in this case Iran, to get there to produce nuclear energy. End of story. With the change of the regime in 1979, that of course changed the story. Now the Iranian nuclear program is something that's hostile, and it did, at least for some point, become hostile. But I want you guys to keep in mind, the origin of the Iranian nuclear program is nuclear energy in a secular government supported by other secular governments, right? So a lot of the stuff is political, and then it becomes religious, and then everything just sort of gets lost in the mix. What is the U.S. doing in the Gulf beside Bahrain, right? He has a great sort of discussion about that. And if you look, there's actually a great map if you look at U.S. Army bases around Iran. And if you look at it's sort of a stark image. How much boots on the ground we have, and boots, and so we say above the water, around Iran. And if you could picture, for example, Iranian boats or ships hanging around the Gulf of Mexico, the Jersey Shore, Santa Monica, just sort of hanging around American shores, how would we feel? Something also for you to keep in mind. And this is a story of what? This is a story of principally the U.S. securing energy markets, global energy markets. It means that armies and navies and ship and aircraft carriers, all of this costs billions of dollars, right? You think about how much we spend on defense. The U.S. spends more on defense than the next several countries combined, right? It's hundreds of billions a year. So you think about that, and a lot of that is to secure energy markets. This is a very, very expensive business. You guys are going to be the next generation of professionals out there. Find a more inexpensive, less disastrous way to secure energy markets, right? That's one of the lessons. The third day of reading, we looked, of course, at LNG, and you guys learned about this sort of notorious North Field. What is the North Field? And why is it a point of contention? So the North Field, you guys are reading about that today, is this natural gas field between Qatar and Iran. Now the entire sort of Persian Gulf area is just sort of riddled with hydrocarbons, natural gas, oil, etc. like that. And most of the North Field sort of belongs to Qatar, whereas Iran is much bigger and it has the smaller portion, so it's caused conflicts as well. Now, when this book was written, that was one layer of conflict between Qatar and Iran over the North Field natural gas field, right? Now there's another conflict, of course, which has brewed after Jürgen's book between Saudi Arabia and Qatar, ostensibly because Qatar was sort of talking to Iran. Now, of course, in my opinion, they would because they share a natural gas field. But it's complicated, and it has everything to do with, again, with energy, with politics, with religion, everything you can imagine. So there's that as well. He does, of course, mention shale and fracking, or hydraulic fracturing, right? We have that here in the U.S. I want you to think about, especially in 2014, right, the price of gas here, when it's at its peak, it sort of plummets. It goes from way above 100 to way, way below 100, almost more like 25, 30 bucks. And hundreds of thousands of jobs in this country are lost and around the world. Has a pretty serious impact on Houston. The oil price has more or less recovered, but it's not at those sort of record rates. Why? Why did that happen? If we were in a classroom, I'd ask you, and I'd ask you to solicit answers, but a lot of it has to do with shale. It has to do with two countries. It has to do with the U.S. and with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, of course, is pumping as much sort of heavy crude oil as they can because 90% of their economy is oil-based. And the U.S., of course, increased their production so much through sort of technology, basically, that was developed here in Houston, which is basically fracturing. This sort of horizontal drilling and pumping water basically underneath the ground to bring out a very high quality hydrocarbons, which you can again burn and make a profit off of. So between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, they flooded the oil market, the global oil market. So when you flood the market with the supply, the demand goes down. Demand goes down means that the price goes down. And that's what happened. And of course, neither side was willing to sort of cut production, except later on they cut a little bit, right? And they've sort of readjusted. But that's a story. That's a story of the gas price, and it was already starting during Jurgen's time. So that's a quick summary, just an image. 283 in Jurgen's book. You have choke points. Can you see it there? Anyway, so 283. He identifies 7 choke points, which really are sort of isthmuses, canals, the narrow bodies of water where ships need to travel through, tankers. It's access to markets. It's access to profit, wealth for capitalism, right? And you will note, friends, if you look at that page, out of the 7, 6 of them, forgive me, 5 of them are in Muslim majority countries, and 4 of them are in the Middle East out of 7. Think about that for a second, right? So that's not necessarily oil in and of itself, oil or gas or coal. It is access to those markets. So the Middle East will continue to be extremely important for decades down the road. Even if they're no longer, even if, let's say the Gulf of Mexico area sort of takes over in terms of oil production. Or if, and this is the next video that I'll make for you guys, if renewable energy start taking over. The Middle East is going to perpetually be important for global markets because of access. Something also for you to think about. Especially when our governments here in Western countries in the US start demonizing immigrants and Muslims and foreigners and Iran, etc. Demonizing them because of certain their religious beliefs or because of their travel habits or anything, right? I want you guys to read in deeper than that, right? It has to do with energy markets. It has to do with strategic demand and supply. It has to do with, basically political interests. But that's not what they tell you in the media or the news. They're not going to tell you that, we need access to the whatever oil fields or LNG fields. They're going to say, so-and-so country are terrorists. So-and-so nation have committed this heinous human rights act. I want you guys always to think critically, right? A great piece of wisdom from 90s hip-hop, right? Don't believe everything you read. I'm sure it's older than that. So keep that in mind, guys, as you read Jurgen, okay? It's a great book. What is energy security? I think you guys have a good idea right now. And how does that sort of influence the sort of conflicts we have around the world? And even today, when you look at the policies of our current government, immigration, whether it's bans or anything of that nature, what's really at stake here? What's really going on, right? A lot of it is economic. So that's it for now. The next video will talk about renewables and maybe some of the videos. Okay? Take care. Bye.